Welcome, everybody. It is so great to see so many of you here. My name's Eleanor. I am part of Tilt, and this is our fourth summer story season. So the fourth year that we have been sharing stories like Shaila's, with the goal of inspiring you all, sharing case studies of success of new, modern ways of working, agile ways of working across non-profits and charities in the UK and overseas, with the goal of giving you inspiration, tools, confidence to take back into your organizations and keep making positive change. We know it can be challenging at times, it can be lonely at times, and how important it is to hear stories of other people's success as well as some of their challenges. And so that's what we're going to be aiming to do today. At Tilt, we are 5 years old this year, and we have spent that 5 years working with 40 plus non-profit organisations to help them to embed more agile ways of working. So yeah, it's such a joy for us to be able to share amazing stories like Shaila's. And specifically, Shaila's story that we're going to hear today, we hope that it will show you what's possible when you have the courage to give agile ways of working a go, particularly when those around you aren't. We know that's one of the top questions that we're asked. We hope that you'll leave encouraged with some ideas and activities and some confidence to start realising the benefits of agile ways of working, even when nobody else is. I won't share too many spoilers, but before I ask Shaila to introduce herself, what we're hoping that you'll see in this story that she is sharing is how you can work in an agile way even when no one else is around you, how you can use agile ways of working to deliver really large, complex, and really important pieces of work, and how Shaila did that by building a transformational fundraising marketing strategy in an agile way, by trusting the process, iterating, drawing on really diverse perspectives from across the organization, and through that was able to unlock really high quality insights, a really brilliant strategy, which she'll show you, and save many hundreds of thousands on external agencies' fees, which otherwise might have been spent. So without any further ado, I'm so excited to introduce you all to Shaila Varma at the British Red Cross. But I'm actually going to ask Shaila, would you introduce yourself? Let us know a little bit more about you, your background, and what you do now at the British Red Cross.
Yeah, sure. Before we kick off my interview, as you phrased it, Eleanor, so looking forward to getting grilled. So I'm Shaila. So first thing to say is I spent half my life explaining how to pronounce my name. So I developed a very exciting rhyme, so you can all remember. It's Shaila rhymes with umbrella. So don't get thrown by the spelling. And I'm the head of strategy and portfolio at the British Red Cross. Been here for years now, over 10 years. And I've worked in what was individual giving, direct marketing, and then moved into strategy function a few years ago. And have done a bit of agile training as well with Ellen team. So did that in kind of prior to starting the piece of work I'm going to talk to you all about today. So that's me.
Thanks, Shaila. Right, let's dive in then. Could you set this scene for us? Why did you decide to give agile ways of working a go, and how did you decide to do it on this project specifically?
Yeah, definitely. So, as I mentioned, myself and several members of my team, some of whom are here today, so thanks guys for joining, had done agile training. So we'd kind of heard it as an exciting thing to do and thought, this could really help us deliver what we wanted to deliver in a more impactful way. British Red Cross is a huge organisation, right? So we've got a few hundred staff in my directorate, which was marketing and fundraising. And we're not known for agility. A few of us are certainly trying. I know I've got colleagues here from other teams as well. And there's definitely agile experts or people have kind of just started to give it a go. But as a charity, we are not agile, and we're certainly not agile for things that have lots of stakeholders, or particularly, in my experience, things with a lot of interest from finance. So we've got quite a lot of structures, which I wouldn't describe as agile. And so the piece of work that we decided to try this out for was developing a new strategy to unite our directorates. So we could just come together as marketing and fundraising, and we wanted to develop a new strategy. And it's fair to say, at this point in time, people were even worried about the word agile. So it's like if you said it, you'd get kind of eyes glazing over, or they might just shake their head and say, we're not agile. And this was at the beginning of 2024, which you will all know as charity colleagues, was like perhaps the fourth year of unprecedented times, right? So our plans were changing every 5 minutes because of the global context, because of our supporters, what they were sort of seeing happen, and particularly for us, as our role is a humanitarian charity that responds to emergencies. And so I was given this task: develop a new strategy. And my manager said to me, we should only bother doing this if it's going to raise more money. So there was a little bit of pressure on. And I was feeling a bit nervous about this, but also quite excited. And mostly, I just wanted to make sure we would do some useful work. So I really wanted to make sure we didn't just, write a strategy, put it in a drawer, nobody pay attention to it, but, we could say we'd gone through the process and we had a document. I really didn't want to do that. And like I said, some colleagues had done Agile in action as well. And I knew I wasn't the only one that was sort of excited about trying out new ways of working. So while the overall context didn't feel like it was that encouraging, definitely had some allies, I'd say, in trying this out. And I had a sneaky feeling that it would be exciting to do as well. And I think I've got like a comment in my JD somewhere that says lead new ways of working. So I thought I'll give this a go. And if it goes really wrong, I can shelve it. So that's the situation we're in. And I guess like just early on to kind of skip right to the end of the story, the strategy that we developed launched on time. We also had to launch a couple of emergency appeals throughout the period that we were developing it. So even kind of getting it out on time was a great achievement. It ended up being way bolder than we thought it would be. And it's been described as outstanding by the leadership team. And it is already driving big changes, which are helping us engage audiences more effectively. And so, yeah, really glad that I decided to try out Agile for the strategy project.
Thanks, Shella. Yeah, and I remember you saying that this strategy also enabled you to unlock this ongoing conundrum of how do we manage a situation in which, as organizations, what we'd really like is more unrestricted funding that we can spend on anything. And more what our supporters are asking for is that they want to see specifically where their money is going. And that's something that I got really excited about the strategy that you've developed, is found a way that you can achieve both of those needs together.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really by leaning into that problem head on, which I feel that we wouldn't have done so wholeheartedly, I think, if not for trying out agile ways of working.
Nice, thank you. So how did you get started then? You brought together a team to work on this, which is always something that we really advocate for at Tilt, and that is a core part of an agile approach, bringing together a small cross-functional team. But yeah, tell us a bit more about how you started.
Yes, we did exactly that. But even before sort of bringing together a small team, a few people in my immediate team did a bit of discovery and kind of collating thoughts. And that included sort of reading all of our existing strategies. So for anyone else in a fundraising organisation, you might feel the same, that you might have sort of strategies coming out of your ears almost, but how do you get something that sort of unites everybody? So we did that sort of bit of discovery in advance. And one thing that I felt really clear on, having learned it in Agile training, is that we needed to have the experts involved right at the beginning. So I head up the strategy and portfolio team, and we've got a mix of team members that come from different backgrounds in fundraising, but essentially we're a sort of central unit. And we knew that we needed kind of like frontline fundraisers, if you like, marketers, and people with different areas of expertise. And so agreed with our DMT, which is our Directorate Management Team, just to explain an acronym, because we've got loads of those at the British Red Cross, that we would have a multidisciplinary group. And we agreed with them that it would be a kind of a manageable group size. So we wouldn't have everyone from sort of every sub team. Again, at the Red Cross, we're a huge organisation. So we decided to have this kind of manageable group. We did get wider input as well. I can kind of come to that later on if useful. But in order to sort of kick off that group, where it was people from my team and also these kind of reps from other teams, we put a lot of thought into planning a kick-off session, which is again something that took away as a crucial learning from Agile training, and decided in that that we would cover. We'd set ourselves up to start really well, and so designed a meeting to cover what should our structure be as a group, what should some principles be, and what should some ways of working be. I don't know if it's helpful. I did a few slides just because this is like such a visual thing to say. So if we like drop them in the chat, the first one is literally a couple of screenshots from a Miro that we had. And what you'll be able to see there is, oh, there we go. Thank you, Julia. So this like big green box, how we work together. Literally for the session, I had just added those blue post-its, hadn't added anything else beforehand except for the kind of headings for principles and ways of working. And we did the rest in the session. So together co-created those ways of working. And as you'll see, it was really great because someone else said Agile. It wasn't me telling people this is what we're going to do. It actually came from our group. And we had another great principle in there, I think, that came from somebody else in the team around asking difficult questions. So it was really helpful in, as you kind of asked, like, how did we bring the team together to make sure that we all had a chance to feed in to how we'd work together, and did that right at the beginning. So that was our kickoff. We kind of went through our principles, our ways of working, and then gave a bit of context on, on the situation, and then generated together actions. And we got loads of useful actions added. So after that one session, I was already really pumped for like crowdsourcing the way forward. I knew that I'd got so much more from the team than like if I'd have just done this myself, or if a couple of us had kind of been, locked away in a room, which is something people often say they're going to do when especially developing a strategy. And that board, if you move on to the next slide, if possible, Julia, like this is my like end result. So from that little kind of green green area, that's now become a tiny little thing in the corner, because this became our board for the whole project. And so we used it in a really open way. It was like having a kind of board in the office, a room that you would just use, but so much more inclusive virtually, right? Colleagues didn't have to be in the office to take part. And we used it as a small working group, for kind of every single meeting we'd refer back to this board. And we also used it, like we went radically open, right? So we did kind of open invite sessions sometimes for the whole directorate, everything on that board. And I think another thing I'd say, just in terms of like bringing people together, was how I sort of felt. And I remember this came up, I think, in some Agile training that we'd done, and I really felt this when working on this project. I was a cross between a ringmaster in a circus and a life coach. Ringmastering because Miro was kind of like the circus ring in a way, so I had to make sure we got everything on the Miro. Like ask people to make sure they added their actions, they added their notes, and make sure then that the conversation was about the really big things. So what were the most important outcomes we could drive in the next few weeks and months? Was there something anyone thought that we were missing? Could there be ways that this could all go terribly wrong? So just that kind of acting as a ringmaster was almost like you need to create a space where people can bring all their expertise, have the structure there to draw on, and also just get into that behaviour of questioning our own work. And having done the principles together at the beginning really helped that. And some techniques like asking open questions, allowing people thinking time before they answered them. So kind of asking a question and then specifically saying, everyone, let's take a couple of minutes to think about that, then maybe write down your answers. With some concrete techniques that I used in my sort of life coach hat on to make sure we got the best out of the group. And so I really feel like using those agile techniques gave me the confidence and skills to combine the sort of technical bits of running a session and with also just asking the big open questions in a useful way that people could answer them.
Mm. Thanks for sharing a screen, Julia. I don't think we need it for the next couple of minutes. A couple of things that I really just wanted to point out, Shaila, that I love that you talked about there. Starting off this work by spending some time agreeing ways of working. Definitely years ago, I would have been guilty of kind of thinking, isn't that just a waste of time? Why aren't we just getting on with the work? And I've certainly learned the hard way that spending that time that you did at the beginning, agreeing how we're going to work together, what's our structure, even if you then go on and adapt that later, is such a wise investment of time, especially with such variety of people involved and with so many eyes on it. So it was great to see that. Also wonderful to see that transparent working really paying off for you. So you kind of being radically transparent. I'm assuming that means that anyone could come in and look at that Miro board, see what was happening, ask questions, check in, rather than needing to necessarily come to you or you needing to send long report emails on how things are going.
Yeah, that's partly true. So yes, absolutely, anybody could drop in. And we, like I say, we used it when we did sort of like open invite sessions or wider sessions, not just in our own team, but with sort of stakeholders across the organisation. But what I will say, that is maybe useful for people to know is I did also, you know, it wasn't a kind of utopia where everyone kind of came to us. I did also do like bespoke communications, especially for our directorate management team, as I say, so like the directors. Although they had access, I knew they weren't going to drop in there off their own accord, and so I did make you know, we as a team, we'd sort of set up slide decks for them so we could give them presentations. But I really don't think that was more work. If anything, it was easier for me to be able to do those communications, having the Miro and having all of our team involved in building it and knowing exactly where we were with our work. So yeah, there was the ability for anyone to drop in. I also did given the context, like I say, where not everybody is kind of fully into agile ways of working. I also did some separate communications for VIP stakeholders.
Love that. The final thing that I wanted to highlight, which I loved about your approach, was you thinking of yourself as a facilitator, almost as a coach for the group, noticing when your role was to be that ringmaster and ask questions and bring people together to surface answers or options or challenges or opportunities rather than feeling the need to direct and have all the answers. And certainly that really aligns with that agile principle of taking a more coaching approach, bringing out the knowledge of the network rather than all of that information just needing to come from you. So it's, yeah, brilliant to see that. So you have already talked a little bit about this sort of open, transparent approach. Would you tell us a bit more about how you involve people outside of that core multidisciplinary group that were actually doing the work?
Yeah, definitely. And I think yes, like I loved changing my kind of perspective and my mindset, like you say. And I knew that sort of bringing in diverse perspectives was the key to developing a better quality strategy. But also to have more people on board with the strategy by the time we launched, and that really did pay off. So yeah, some of the ways that we did this, well, we designed how we would do that as a group. So we had a really brilliant communications plan and kind of way to engage different teams and different audiences. And we were as inclusive as possible with the help of online tools. So Miro, like I'd said, and we had kind of open invites sometimes where people didn't have to come along, but actually we wanted to show that anybody could get involved and not be sort of, it didn't matter about, you know, the hierarchy or your other work. If you wanted to come along and had the time, you could do that. I would say something I found really interesting when I was doing agile training and really hard at first actually was thinking like, how can you be agile for something that's not developing a product where you've got sort of a, I guess, a clearer outcome that, or a clearer like end product, I guess, that you want to get to. But I found it was really useful and kind of critical for strategy development as well. And these like open sessions and kind of bringing in a broader group was you know, a real way that manifested. And so listening to feedback and reflecting on it was just part of our ethos, really. And what I would say is that doesn't mean we adjusted to everything, you know, that people might have commented, but it did mean we would review every post-it on that Miro. So when we did sessions and we got kind of input from people, we listened to everything and we had a mindset of feedback is part of our process. So like one sort of key takeaway I guess I have is using agile techniques, I think helps you be more courageous in your communication and also to properly reflect on feedback and that not feel like a demoralizing process for your team, because you know I've been there in the past where you think you've done a really great piece of work and then someone gives you loads of comments like that can feel really tricky. But I hope, I know some of my team are here so they can say whether they felt this or not, like I certainly felt as a leader that knowing that I was designing feedback into the process and help me kind of reflect on that more. So I think it's that mindset of wanting wider
Yeah.
input, firstly. Yeah, and then I'll say like agile sort of ceremonies, to use some of the language. I think there's just outward lookingness kind of built in that helps you to inform where you go next. So I think that encourages much more focus on outcomes and less like less nonsense. You know, it strips away the stuff that isn't that helpful and kind of makes you focus on where you're going to get to. And if you haven't achieved an outcome that you wanted to get to, you need to think about other ways to get there. So I found agile ceremonies and kind of ways of working really, really useful in that, like bringing in a wider group. And I guess like actually I've got last visual, I think. I've got an example, and Niall is here, so I feel a bit silly like talking through something that Niall did really well. But the reason I just wanted to share this is these are kind of a few stages in development of our strategy visual. So at the top is where we started, like we had this pyramid and kind of had these ideas of like what was happening at the base, and then you know, like wider input and where we'd go in the future at the top of the pyramid. And then we had this like later iteration. These aren't all of them, by the way, there was like several in between these stages, but these are the kind of the main ones where we had this like red button in the middle and then like arrows feeding in. And then ultimately this is where we ended up, like I say, thanks to Niall. And I'm really proud of the team for developing this, because like it shows that we really listened to what people said and experimented and then designed something really useful that helped us land the concept of the strategy more. And I asked now, like, what specific things about agile techniques helped deliver such great quality work. A few of those key points were working out in the open. So like we were saying, having everything saved on Miro, where that was open and editable by everyone, meant that there was a holistic view of everything, and it was really comprehensive. And so anyone could sort of take that all in at their own pace and be able to play around with different ideas. Also, like we said, kind of including people with the right skills and knowledge from the very beginning was really important. So Niall and like we say, other key people were involved at the start. And so as the project went on, everyone was able to ask questions and make contributions. And so that meant that they were, you know, able to connect the dots between the different ideas, which is really important for a strategy. And to be able to, we've all had strategies before, right? Or we've all seen them where they're like 30 pages long, and you kind of read it and you're like, but okay, there's a lot to this. I know there's a lot to this, but really, how does this help me? And actually, I always do. I have literally got this pyramid as a poster on my wall because it is so useful to refer to when we're working, and say kind of, we got there. From having the right people at the beginning. And another key thing that Niall mentioned was that we had this sort of trust and respect built in. So, like, partly from the kind of principles of how we work together. And just principles of, it's not about hierarchy. We had in our group a mix of kind of ranks, for want of a better word. Like, our director would come along, and people who were kind of in more more junior roles, and we'd all speak together and had the principle that we should all respect each other, and it's kind of equal contribution. And so that encouraged people to speak their mind and try new things. So yeah, I just wanted to. No, I feel so silly saying this is your great work, but I just wanted to give a flavour of like how agile techniques help to enable that. And thanks for sharing that slide, Julia. But yeah, hopefully that gives a bit of an idea of how we kind of built in these ceremonies to kind of get like constant feedback and involvement of different people. And another thing I would just say is agile doesn't replace the skills that people have. So I think it's a great way to realize all the benefits of those skills. But it doesn't replace, the fundraising knowledge that we had, the marketing experience. So it's not something that you can sort of take a group of agile experts and just use that to deliver a strategy or product or anything like that. But it is a great way to make sure that you make the most of the skills that different people have got as well.
Thanks for that, Shaila. Definitely, that's something that it can feel like we have such depth of expertise across our organizations, and sometimes the structures and the ways that we work can get in the way of us fully maximizing the depth of that experience and knowledge and skill. And that's certainly something that we get really excited about at Tilt, is the way that that kind of the structure that agile ways of working brings enables, by you taking a more facilitatory style and more asking more questions, you're able to gather more of that knowledge from the group, like you said, sort of sharing the responsibility more, rather than you being directive. In terms of leading the project is just one way in which you can sort of really draw on all of that expertise that's already there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just people knowing that they're there to use their expertise, but also to engage with others. Then everyone sort of becomes, a team working through feedback in a way that's really useful in just getting to a better quality outcome at the end.
Shall we talk a bit about, you mentioned this already, the end product of the strategy. So it's a really great point that you made, that agile ways of working are often more associated with product development, and obviously your product at the end here is something quite different. And you've said that you did feel that agile techniques were working well on building a strategy, even though you didn't have sort of a tangible product at the end. Can you tell us a bit more about like what was easy, what was hard about that? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think yeah, agile is really applicable to strategy development. Like, I'd say I will never run a strategy process in a waterfall way again. I think, like, by definition, developing any strategy, if you want to do it properly and be used as a strategy, it means you're working into the unknown. And you shouldn't know where you're going to end up by the end if you truly are doing a kind of a new strategy. And so yeah, it was hard at the beginning setting outcomes, and I remember we kind of tried to do this in one of our early meetings, and then actually, like, two of later meetings down the line, we sort of chucked all of that out and completely changed. But that was felt okay because we knew that as a team, we were here to sort of iterate our own work. So I'd say what can be difficult is you are working into the unknown. But that's always going to be difficult, especially for us, whose role it is to engage the audiences who are external. We're always, and particularly in the current sort of global context and UK context, things are changing really quickly. So it is difficult. It is a bit messy. So, like I say, I will never go back to a kind of waterfall approach where it's sort of so defined. I think also you do get the business value out sooner through Agile. So like I say, we did these like collaborative sessions. We did apart from the actual sessions, we also did communication sort of in like our town halls, had emails, things like that. So people sort of knew where we were up to. So they already start thinking about, right, what is this? Where is this going? And that makes it easier for people to understand it later on rather than just, being confronted with something as an end product and then needing to kind of understand everything really quickly. So I'll say that bit about the business value does come more quickly with Agile. So I think what is hard but is a kind of important challenge that I felt that I like leaned into a bit more is that using Agile techniques focuses you much more on the difference you need to make, rather than the product you want to deliver. And that's what felt really like working against the current. So, anyone who's here from the Red Cross will will empathise. We got questions like, okay, what is this strategy? What is it going to be for? What's it going to help us do? Or could a few of us just write this in the room? Wouldn't that be quicker? Should a couple of directors take this on? Should we really open this up? Like, or even does it really make sense to try new ways of working at the same time as delivering something new? So that was hard, right? I had to hold my ground and say, I don't know what the outcomes of this are going to be, but I definitely felt backed by the team in saying that. And yes, a few of us could have just gone away into a room and written something, but actually, as I've already said, I don't think that would have been as high quality. I don't think we'd be seeing like actually transforming results later on. And also, I think being able to launch, so when the moment came to kind of launch the strategy as like a group of experts, rather than just like one or two people, that was really much more powerful. And so, yes, was absolutely applicable to a strategy rather than kind of a product. And I do think, yeah, like if you want to just do something, you've got a difficult task and you just sort of want to get it off your plate, and it's not something that you really want to deliver something completely new and different. That might not be the project for you to try it out on. But to actually solve big problems, like I will always use this approach in future. I think it saved me and the team time. And like I said, we didn't bring in a kind of strategy agency or anything like that. We did this internally, and I definitely feel proud of like our wider team in delivering this.
That's great to hear. I know hear of some organizations who are spending, hundreds of thousands of pounds getting a
Yeah.
strategy that doesn't always live inside the organization, and something that I'm confident will have happened because you have involved people at every step of the process is that they feel more bought in. They can see themselves in this strategy, and then rather than having to do a huge slog of kind of launching it and then getting buy-in, you were building buy-in throughout the process, which is great to see.
Yeah, and also like building the quality, I think. So one of the big sort of specific changes we made in response to feedback is we had originally sort of had like two big principles for our strategy, and then we got some really clear feedback from our partnerships and philanthropy team. They were like, yeah, this isn't, part of this isn't going to work for us. And I think we could have taken that, that could have been really disheartening, or we could have just sort of worked in their point without considering it really deeply. But actually, when we got that feedback, we brought a group together and kind of really worked through, well, what does it mean? How can we address this? Where do we need to get to essentially? And so ended up making quite a big change, but one that was definitely for the better.
Mm, that's something that I thought of earlier when you were talking about getting feedback throughout the process. That's such a positive, although it can be uncomfortable to open yourself up to feedback, especially from a right across the organization. By doing it regularly, it then makes it less of a challenge to overcome. It does make it more welcome. If you're asking for feedback throughout, then when folks do share something that isn't working for them or a challenge, it's something that you have time to integrate and explore. Whereas sometimes if we're working in a more waterfall way, the point at which by the time we ask for feedback, we're already sold. We've already really invested and fully built out this strategy. So feedback can be a bit of a gut punch.
Yeah.
Whereas because you were getting it regularly, you had the time to be able to go, oh, great point, let's explore it and build it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's much less pressured. It's not like you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is my final round of feedback, and tomorrow this goes to like the printers. That you're doing it right from the beginning. So I won't lie, of course it is still challenging. Especially I'm like a bit of a perfectionist as well. Like, I want everyone to say, I love this, it's brilliant. But actually, when you look back and take a kind of longer term perspective, the pressure is reduced so much when you keep asking for feedback, and you do get a better result. So yeah, I think it was a great way to, like, some really practical ways to incorporate feedback that meant we got to a better result and had more buy-in from teams.
Mm. So then bring us up to the kind of present day. Where did you end up at the end of this piece of work?
Where we ended up is we solved one specific big problem, which you'd mentioned earlier around this like restricted and unrestricted funds thing. And we lent into it head on. So it was kind of our supporters and or potential supporters really know us for emergencies, but actually that's always in the past been very restricted funds. So we ended up with like lots of different ways that we can lean into our USP as the world's emergency responder, and also raise more flexible funds for the organisation. So that was a huge win. We're now much more able to use our best selling points. And for our fundraising teams also now, we're much closer to like everything counting. In the past it had felt a bit like you can work really hard, and anyone that's in a kind of emergency response charity, or anywhere where something suddenly in the news will know, you can work really hard, and then actually it feels like, oh, it's restricted income, so it's not sort of part of the whole, it's maybe not as good. But actually this strategy helps us address that. We got it signed off by the CEO, got really good feedback, and from the CFO as well, and launched it to the whole directorate, and it was really well received. And I remember that in comparison to previous launches, it felt more exciting, I think it's fair to say, and got great feedback from our DMT as well. It's too early to tell. I'd love to be like, and we have grown by £10 million. It's too early to tell you. So it's a long-term strategy, but we are monitoring lots of the kind of and lead KPIs as well, and like really positive signs, which is great. And I think like one big learning actually is that we ended the working group like fairly soon after we launched the strategy. We shouldn't have done that. Like, should have actually kept that going. We've kind of relaunched it again, but we just had a bit of a like momentum dip after launch. So actually, one big learning for me is like I shouldn't have seen it as a kind of endpoint, launching and then thinking like now we move into implementation. We should have kind of kept going. So yeah, we definitely haven't like finished this work. I mean, it's a long-term strategy, and we are continuing that ethos of what a team's telling us. It's not perfect, right? We're hearing from teams, oh, this bit's not entirely clear, can you give us more sort of guidance? And Vic in my team actually is now writing like an updated version of our sort of strategy write-up, because in the 8-ish months since it's launched, we've already learned a lot. So, like we said, we didn't want to just keep something in a drawer. We wanted to kind of come back to it. So yeah, I think that's kind of where we are. I think also didn't shout loudly internally about Agile because that wasn't the point. The point was that we were doing a new piece of work that we wanted people to buy into. Um, but actually, I would say in my team, like certainly we feel more confident in it. We know that we can kind of like dip into agile ways of working. We can like sprinkle some agile techniques into lots of areas of work, even with finance. And because we've kind of kept this like focus on you keep going and keep revisiting the strategy, it's not out of date, and it's another unprecedented year, right? There's loads of things going on, but actually we've just having that kind of ethos of, well, we won't just do this and put it in the drawer, means that it's easier for us to kind of revisit our work and keep going. So yeah, we haven't ended up. I'll have to come back next year and tell you what more have we learned and how are things going.
And we would love to hear that. And yeah, it's great to hear how that taking an iterative approach in building your strategy has then enabled you to keep iterating it once it's out there in the world so that it doesn't go out of date even in an unprecedented year like this one, because it does seem like we're going to just keep on having these unprecedented years. So it's great to hear it's not just a piece of paper in a drawer, it's continually already being iterated and updated.